He thought he was hugging his little sister. She thought she was being attacked by a stranger in a suit. But what if that wrong hug was the beginning of the right love story? What happens when a powerful CEO, lost in the crowd and in his own life, accidentally embraces a woman who's just lost her job and maybe a little faith in the world? Could a mistaken moment at a busy train station unravel years of loneliness and stitch together two hearts from completely different worlds? She wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to fall in love. And no one expected the chaos, the career risk, the stolen glances, and a bulldog named Winston who somehow became the unexpected hero. But here's the real question. Can love born from a mistake survive family pressure, corporate whispers, and their own fears? This is the story of Leona and Nathaniel, a story about timing, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't knock, it collides. If you believe that sometimes the wrong person turns out to be the right one all along, share this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a single moment of this unforgettable journey. Now, let's begin the story. At exactly 6:45 in the evening, the Grand Elm station was swarming with people, the kind of crowd that felt like the entire city had decided to escape at once. Somewhere in that sea of motion stood Nathaniel Gray, a 43-year-old business tycoon, dressed like the cover of a luxury magazine, but looking as if he had been dropped into the wrong universe. Eyes darting, shoulders stiff. Nathaniel spun in slow circles, trying to keep calm. She said denim jacket, hair in a braid, sunflower print bag. He whispered to himself, scanning every face with growing impatience. Then, just a few meters ahead, his eyes locked onto what seemed like a perfect match. Denim jacket, messy braid, bag covered in sunflowers. That had to be her. Sophie, his little sister, always running late. Without a second thought, he moved swiftly through the crowd, with open arms and a grin he hadn't worn in weeks. He scooped the girl into a big hug from behind, lifting her slightly off the ground in excitement. "There you are, late again, huh? What were you doing?" "Solving crossword puzzles with strangers," but the girl didn't laugh. She didn't even move. She turned, slowly, sharply, and not with recognition, but with confusion. Then disbelief. Nathaniel froze. It wasn't Sophie. It was someone he had never seen in his life. Her eyes were wide with alarm. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped, voice trembling somewhere between fear and fury. Nathaniel stepped back so fast he nearly lost his balance, bumping into someone's luggage. I'm so sorry. I mistook you for someone else," he stammered, hands raised. But the woman didn't give him the luxury of a pause. She swung her canvas bag hard into his shoulder. "You think it's okay to grab strangers like that?" she shouted. "Some kind of sick game to you." People around them began to glance over. Not quite a crowd, but enough eyes to make Nathaniel feel like the ground might swallow him. "I swear," he said, "I was looking for my sister. She said she'd be wearing exactly that jacket and bag." She cut him off with a glare that could have stopped traffic. "So your plan was to hug the first woman who checked those boxes?" Nathaniel rubbed his arm where the bag had hit. "That was careless. I admit it. But I meant no harm." She folded her arms, staring him down. "You rich types always think you can act without consequences. I don't blame you for being upset," Nathaniel replied, voice quieter now. "If it helps, you've got a solid swing. My shoulder's still recovering." Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite forgiveness, but the tension in her shoulders softened. A security officer nearby paused, assessing the situation, then decided to move on. Clearly, this wasn't a threat, just a man in a suit who had made a deeply awkward mistake. "All right," Nathaniel said, slowly. "My name's Nathaniel. I usually know better than this. Today, Clearly wasn't one of those days. She eyed him for a moment. You dress like you own the moon, and you think this is just a misunderstanding. Perspective matters, he said with a small shrug. She shook her head. If this is your idea of a charming introduction, you're not doing great. He chuckled lightly. Fair enough. Peace offering. Nathaniel offered a sheepish grin. At least give me your name, so I know what to write in my apology letter, or court statement, depending on how this ends. The girl let out a breath, half exasperated, half amused. Leona Brooks. I'm waiting for my mom. She's coming back from a weekend trip with her usual crew of bingo fanatics and dramatic television lovers. Nathaniel chuckled. Sounds like a wild crowd. Not as wild as being accidentally tackled by a billionaire in public, she replied, her tone dry. Please, he said, placing a hand on his chest in mock sincerity. Let's just call it a terribly mistimed, inspirational hug. Her eyes rolled toward the ceiling, but this time, the corners of her lips tugged upward. All right, Mr. Inspirational, she said. But do me a favor, don't make this a tradition. Just then, a familiar voice rang out behind him. Nathaniel. He turned to see Mira, his 20-year-old sister, trotting toward them, hair pulled back, wearing a faded denim jacket, but notably missing any kind of floral bag. There you are, she said breathlessly. I was late because some lady stopped me to ask if I'd been on a reality show. Can you believe that Nathaniel pointed at Leona, still standing nearby, the awkwardness lingering between them? I may have mistaken her for you, and hugged her like a lunatic. Mira glanced at Leona, then at her brother, her face slowly breaking into the kind of mischievous smile that could start fires in winter. Oh no. Are you two dating what? Nathaniel blurted. Of course not. Oh, come on. You never talk to strangers. And she's cute. Confident, too. I like her. I was just confused. Mira. Exactly. You confused her for your sister. That's fate. Or at least the start of a very dramatic romantic comedy. Leona, now trying not to laugh, glanced down at her shoes. We should get going, she said lightly. It's been interesting being someone else for a moment. She turned to Mira. Maybe next time, tell your brother to wear a warning label. Something like, may hug random strangers without notice. Or a reflective vest. Nathaniel added with a smile. To prevent further motivational incidents. Leona paused, gave him one last amused look. Just promise you won't crash my wedding someday, claiming it all began with Destiny's hug. And with that, she walked toward a petite older woman dragging a pale pink suitcase covered in quirky stickers. They embraced, laughter blooming between them like spring after rain. Nathaniel and Mira walked the opposite direction, his steps slower than usual. She really was lovely, Mira said thoughtfully. It was a mistake, he muttered. An embarrassing one. Sure. She nodded. But sometimes mistakes wear sunflower bags and have the kind of smile that could sell joy in jars. Nathaniel didn't answer. As they climbed into the car, he stole one last glance toward the platform. Leona was still there, laughing with her mother, who was pointing at something in a nearby shop window. He exhaled softly, shutting the door behind him. Maybe I should have asked for her full name, he murmured. Mira grinned like a cat with a secret. Too late. You're already halfway into your first dream about her. Nathaniel looked out the window, voice barely audible. I think I already started. It was supposed to be just another movie night. A light-hearted romantic comedy had just premiered, the kind where fate tosses two strangers into each other's lives after an accidental run-in. Mira had chosen it. Nathaniel hadn't argued. Coincidences happen, she had said. They arrived at the River Bay Mall just moments before the film began. The line at the concessions counter curled through the lobby like a restless ribbon. Nathaniel adjusted his sunglasses, a weak attempt to stay unnoticed in public. "You look like a retired spy trying to blend in," Mira teased. "Perfect. That's exactly the vibe I'm going for," he replied, but stopped mid-sentence, because just ahead, standing near the ice cream kiosk, was Leona. She wore a pair of pale jeans and a soft white shirt sprinkled with tiny sunflowers. She was laughing a real, unguarded kind of laugh, with a friend who spoke with her hands like she was conducting invisible music. "Mira," he whispered urgently, "don't turn around. Too late." Mira spun faster than a leaf in wind. "It's her," she said, voice not even trying to be discreet. "The girl from the station." Leona turned sharply, as if someone had pulled an alarm. Her eyes widened as she spotted Nathaniel awkwardly trying to hide behind his wallet. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, approaching with amusement dancing in her voice. "Is this your thing now? Hug strangers and then follow them to movie theaters?" Nathaniel pulled off his glasses, already defeated. "I swear this wasn't planned." "Oh, sure. Totally believable," she said. "I bet you slipped a tracker into my bag while you were practicing your surprise hug technique." "Hey, for the record," he replied, smiling, "you're the one who ambushed me with that purse of steel. I'm still nursing the bruise." Leona's friend leaned in, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. "So, who's the mystery man with the expensive shoes?" Nathaniel extended a hand politely. "Nathaniel Gray, Melanie," the friend said with a nod. "Ah, so this is the CEO Leona told me about. The one with the deadly hug and the scent of a luxury boutique." Leona gasped and elbowed Melanie. "I never said that." Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "Playful. I'll take it as a compliment, though now I'm wondering what else I missed." "Don't mind her," Leona muttered. "She tends to dramatize." Mira, now practically glowing with delight, grabbed Leona's arm. "Wait, are you two seeing this film too? That's unbelievable. We should sit together." "I'm not sure that's," Nathaniel began, but Melanie cut in. "It's a fantastic idea," she said, exchanging a conspiratorial look with Mira. "Let's start a little club. Something like Operation Embarrass Nathaniel in Public. Founding members already present," Leona added, playing along. In the end, the four of them ended up seated in the same row, with Nathaniel and Leona strategically placed side by side thanks to their two new, overly enthusiastic matchmakers. As the previews rolled, Nathaniel leaned slightly toward her. Would a soda count as a formal apology? Maybe some popcorn, too. She smirked, at the very least. And possibly a handwritten apology certified by a licensed therapist. He laughed under his breath. When the lights dimmed and the movie began, something shifted. The story on screen followed a clumsy man who spilled coffee on a stranger, and then fate kept pushing them back together. "Again and again," Nathaniel whispered. "Subtle choice. Mira." She grinned without looking away. "No idea what you mean." At one point, during a quiet scene, Leona's arm brushed his. Neither moved. It was the tiniest contact, barely a second, but it carried the spark of 1,000 thoughts. Nathaniel didn't look at her, but his heart was no longer watching the movie. By the time the credits rolled, they walked together to a nearby cafe. What began as polite conversation slowly unraveled into something warmer, effortless. Leona stirred her tea and glanced at the tabletop. "I used to work in event planning," she shared, "but things got complicated. I've been between jobs for a few months now." Nathaniel listened, genuinely. "The market's a mess right now," she added, offering a quiet smile that didn't reach her eyes. Leona stirred her milkshake with the tip of her straw, her voice light but laced with a trace of embarrassment. Apparently, people aren't too eager to hire someone whose last science-themed birthday party ended in an unexpected volcanic disaster, she said. What happened? Nathaniel asked, genuinely curious. It was a 7th birthday for a city councilman's son, she explained. Let's just say the kid doubled the vinegar in the baking soda volcano, and the poor man spent 2 weeks picking blue glitter out of his scalp. Melanie jumped in. It wasn't her fault. The boy got a little too enthusiastic. Tell that to the politician who looked like a disco ball exploded on his head, Leona replied, shaking her head. Nathaniel laughed deeply, sincerely in a way he hadn't in weeks. You know? He said, eyes still crinkled with amusement. My company's events division is looking for someone right now. You should apply. Leona raised an eyebrow, her voice full of dry charm. And under special skills, should I include ambushing executives in public spaces that might actually give you an edge? He grinned. Across the table, Mira and Melanie exchanged a look, the unmistakable look of two people silently celebrating the success of a plan. When it was time to part ways, they mysteriously excused themselves to go buy something urgent, leaving Leona and Nathaniel suddenly alone. They're not exactly masters of subtlety, Leona said, watching their retreating backs. Mira has the grace of an elephant doing ballet, Nathaniel replied. A gentle quiet settled between them, neither uncomfortable nor forced. They both started to speak at the same time. You go first, he offered. That job thing, she asked softly. Was that real, or was that your version of a smooth pickup line? He paused, then smiled. Both. We are hiring. And I do want to see you again. No surprise hugs this time. Promise. She looked at him for a moment, as if weighing something invisible. I do need a job, she said. But working for the man who tackled me at a train station, that's a story. The best stories always start with a little chaos. He replied. Leona chuckled, then pulled out her phone. All right then. Give me your number, I'll send over my resume tomorrow. Nathaniel shared his contact details, suddenly feeling the kind of nervous he hadn't felt since college interviews. When Mira and Melanie returned curiously empty-handed, they all said their goodbyes. In the car, Mira couldn't wipe the smirk off her face. What Nathaniel asked, pretending not to care. Oh, nothing, she said, staring out the window. Just thinking about what a charming maid of honor I'll be someday. Nathaniel rolled his eyes. We barely know each other, but you gave her your number, didn't you? He looked down at his phone and froze. I forgot to save her contact. Mira gasped. Seriously, Nathaniel, you really need help. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. He lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying her laughter, her sunflower shirt, and the way her smile had carved a warmth into his chest that even the glow of success never had. Please send that resume, he thought. The next morning, Leona arrived at the towering headquarters of Greystone Hotels 40 minutes ahead of schedule. She sat quietly at the cafe across the street, mentally rehearsing every possible interview question while sipping a cup of coffee so strong it could raise the dead. This wasn't just a job, it was the chance she had been hoping for. She'd done her research more than she'd like to admit. Okay, it might have bordered on full-blown online stalking. Nathaniel Gray wasn't just some rich guy with a charming smile. He was also the person who held the key to turning her life around. The position was no small role either. Corporate Events Coordinator. It sounded like the kind of title that came with both pressure and possibility. Wearing her one and only business suit bought 3 years ago during an end-of-season sale, Leona tried to push away the doubt swirling in her stomach. Rent was overdue. Her fridge was almost empty, and her last real meal had been instant noodles dressed up with ketchup. "You've got this, Leona," she whispered to herself in the mirror of her compact. "Just don't mention the train station incident, or the glitter, or the salsa mix-up at the Cohen's bar mitzvah." Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the glossy, marble-lined lobby greeted by a receptionist whose smile belonged on a billboard. The receptionist greeted her with a brightness that belonged in a commercial for the world's happiest toothpaste. "Good morning. You must be Miss Brooks." "Leona Brooks." Leona nodded. "Yes. I have an interview scheduled for 10 o'clock. The receptionist glanced at the computer screen, then back at her with a curious smile. "Of course. You're expected on the 22nd floor. Mrs. Palmer will be meeting you there." Leona stepped into the elevator, her palms cold despite the layers of nerves already warming her from inside. She whispered the name again in her mind. "Mrs. Palmer." Good. Not him. That would have been complicated. The elevator doors opened to a floor lined in soft marble and quiet elegance. Waiting at the end of the hallway stood a woman with silver hair and the poise of someone who had seen the rise and fall of empires. "Miss Brooks, I'm Diane Palmer, head of human resources. Right this way. Please." Leona followed her down a polished corridor that seemed to stretch into the clouds. Outside a grand double door, Mrs. Palmer paused and turned. "Our CEO, Mr. Gray, likes to personally meet candidates for roles that directly impact brand experience." Leona blinked. "Mr. Gray, indeed. Nathaniel Gray himself. He doesn't do this often. Consider it an unusual honor." Leona's heart skipped. Wait, that Nathaniel. Before she could utter a word, the doors opened and she was gently ushered into a sunlit room with a sweeping view of the city skyline. And there he was, Nathaniel, behind a massive oak desk, phone in hand, just as startled to see her as she was to see him. "Leona, Nathaniel Mrs." Palmer raised an eyebrow. "You two have met." Nathaniel stood abruptly, adjusting his tie like it might steady his pulse. "Yes. We crossed paths. Briefly. Quite literally." Leona added with a wry smile. "It was impactful." There was a beat of silence. Then Nathaniel turned to Mrs. Palmer. "Thank you, Diane. I'll take it from here." Once the door shut behind her, the room felt still not cold, but charged with something unsaid. "You actually applied," he said, walking around the desk to lean casually against it. "Well, you said the offer was real. I needed a job. It felt worth the risk. So yes. Truthfully," he said, "we are hiring. And also, I wanted to see you again. You admit it. Guilty." He smiled. "And yes, I saw your resume. The exploding volcano story, already famous in our HR inbox. You looked me up. My team is fast. But I may have..." Asked Mira. "Who asked Melanie? Who talks a lot? That should weird me out," she said, laughing. "But somehow, it's oddly flattering." He motioned to the chair opposite him. "Let's try to do this right. A real interview. As if you didn't hug me from behind in a public train station, or as if you didn't call me a suit-wearing lunatic." He grinned. Despite the strangeness, the interview began, and to both their surprise, it flowed with ease. Nathaniel asked about her experience. Leona spoke about managing fundraisers, a food festival that almost fell apart. And that time, she had to find a new caterer 30 minutes before a medical conference because the original chef went into anaphylactic shock after touching shrimp. "Resourceful," Nathaniel noted. "And according to my CV, I speak 3 languages, English, Spanish, and enough Italian to order pasta and yell at taxi drivers." He chuckled, genuinely amused. "You're unlike anyone I've ever interviewed. In a please leave now kind of way, or..." No, he said, eyes meeting hers, in the best possible way. For a moment, the air between them softened. Leona looked down, cheeks warming. Nathaniel straightened the papers on his desk, an unnecessary distraction to stay professional. You'd be reporting directly to me, if this works out, he said. The role involves planning all high-level events. It's intense. She nodded. I can handle intense, but, he added, eyes glinting, you'd have to work closely with me. Think you could manage that without swinging handbags? She smiled. Only if you promise no more sneak attack hugs. Deal. Leona extended her hand, voice steady. Looks like we have an agreement. Mr. Gray. Nathaniel shook it gently. The handshake lingered. A few seconds longer than strictly necessary. Well then. Miss Brooks, welcome to Greystone Hotels, he said, the hint of a smile behind his formal tone. You'll be starting next Monday. As she stepped out of the office, Leona's heart felt lighter than it had in months. A steady paycheck. A role she could finally be proud of. And despite how it all began, a boss who was interesting. In a way she hadn't expected. Inside the elevator, her phone buzzed. Message from Nathaniel team alignment meeting tomorrow evening. 8 o'clock, Bellamy's restaurant. No yellow sweater required. Leona let out a soft laugh, typing back quickly. Reply, confirmed. No purse swinging at executives either. As the elevator doors opened, she stepped out with a strange new confidence, like someone had cracked open a window in a stuffy room. Something told her that tomorrow's meeting would be memorable. Bellamy's was the kind of restaurant Leona had only glimpsed on glossy magazine pages in waiting rooms, dim lighting, snow-white linens, and a wine list that looked like a medieval scroll. She wore her best dress, simple black, with a quiet elegance, and arrived precisely at 8. The maitre d' greeted her with a reserved expression, the kind that measured people in quiet glances. Good evening. I believe I have a reservation under Mr. Gray's name. It's for a team meeting. He gave a knowing nod. Yes, miss. Right this way. As they wove through the softly lit dining room, Leona took in the guests, all of them poised, polished, like they belonged in a fashion spread. At a private table tucked near a window that framed the city's skyline in gold. Nathaniel stood up. His smile was the kind that made rooms feel warmer. You came. You hired me yesterday. Skipping the first team meeting would have been a terrible career move. She replied with a grin. He pulled out her chair, in a gesture that felt both outdated and unexpectedly sweet. Leona looked around. So, where's the rest of the team? Nathaniel looked sheepish. Well, this is a slightly more personal meeting. I wanted to talk about how we'll work together. Directly. Ah, she said, raising one eyebrow. A private alignment discussion. In one of the city's most romantic restaurants. Naturally. If it feels inappropriate. I understand, he said quickly, sincerity in his voice. You're free to leave. Leona smoothed her napkin onto her lap, her smile easy, and missed the chance to dine somewhere where the bottled water costs more than what I used to make in a day. Not a chance. The awkwardness melted quickly. To her surprise, Nathaniel was nothing like the image she had built in her mind. He was relaxed, open, even self-deprecating. Not once did he mention profits or property values. Instead, he told her about his worst day on the job. So the governor gets trapped in the elevator. The 5-tier cake starts melting in the lobby, and my tuxedo ruined, an exploding champagne bottle, left me in just boxers and panic. Leona nearly snorted into her wine. What did you do? I improvised. Grabbed a tablecloth, tied it around like a Roman senator, sprinted up to the rooftop, stole a waiter's spare uniform 2 sizes too large and made it back just in time to play the hero, and the governor never knew. All he saw was a man with suspenders, rolled-up sleeves, and enough confidence to fake competence. Leona shook her head, laughing. And now I understand why your job listing said must be quick on your feet. Exactly. Then, his voice lowered just a little. You have no idea how rare it is, he said, meeting her eyes, to sit across from someone who isn't trying to impress me, who's just themselves. For a moment, the room faded into a quiet sort of stillness, and neither of them tried to break it. Leona grinned as she reached for her glass. Who says I'm not trying to impress you? I haven't dropped a single fork tonight. That's a new personal best. Their conversation shifted easily into quieter, more personal stories. Leona shared how she'd grown up as the only child of a literature teacher who was obsessed with dramatic telenovelas from Mexico, and how her childhood smelled like old books and afternoon coffee. Nathaniel spoke more slowly, his voice thoughtful. I took over the business when I was 26, he said, slowly circling his wine in the glass. My father fell ill suddenly, and there wasn't really time to think. I just stepped in. Leona listened, the room seeming to quiet around them. Sometimes it feels like I'm living a version of my life that was handed to me, he continued, not the one I actually dreamed of. She tilted her head. What was the dream? He hesitated, then smiled shyly. I wanted to be an architect. I used to spend hours sketching buildings. I still have a drawer full of blueprints no one's ever seen. It's not too late, Leona said gently, coming from the woman whose last party ended in an accidental glitter storm. That, she said with mock pride, was a misunderstood artistic explosion. They both laughed, and as the laughter faded, Nathaniel leaned in slightly, not with urgency, but as if pulled by something quiet and honest between them. You're different, Leona, he said, and I mean that in the best way. Most people put on a show around me. But you hit me with a handbag on day one. She smirked. Well, the performance anxiety kind of disappears after you've already assaulted your future employer. Their dessert arrived delicate meringue layered with cream and berries. Nathaniel picked at the edge of his napkin, hesitating. I should say this now. Tonight wasn't a work thing. Leona raised her eyebrows in mock shock. Really? You mean revisiting your childhood disappointments isn't standard onboarding procedure? He chuckled, but his eyes remained earnest. I asked you here because I wanted to see you. Away from the office. No job titles, no expectations. So this is a date, if you'd like it to be. She stirred the cream on her plate slowly, thinking. This isn't simple, she said at last. You just hired me. The lines get blurry fast. I understand, he said, and I'll respect whatever boundary you draw. Truly. And if I choose not to draw one, Nathaniel's expression softened, his eyes lighting up in a way that made him seem far younger. Then I'll try not to mess it up. The rest of the evening passed like a song, easy rhythms, quiet harmonies. When they stepped outside, the city shimmered beneath a velvet sky. Nathaniel offered her a ride home. You don't have to, she said. I can grab a cab. I'd really prefer to, he said, unless you still think I'm the lunatic from the train station. Now you're the overdressed restaurant lunatic, she teased, much more refined. In the car. Silence fell, but it wasn't awkward. It was full, restful. Leona glanced sideways at him as he drove, the lines of his face calm, focused nothing like the version of him she had once imagined. When they pulled up in front of her apartment, an old building with cracked steps and charm, he turned off the engine but didn't speak right away. Tonight was unexpected, he said finally. In a bad way, she turned to face him, in the best possible way. Nathaniel leaned forward, slowly, giving her every second to pull away. She didn't. Their kiss was gentle, hesitant at first, then something deeper sparked beneath it. Something that surprised them both. When they parted, they stayed close, breathless. That was, he began. A mistake she offered, suddenly unsure. No, he said. That was incredible. But maybe complicated. Should we pretend it didn't happen? She bit her lip, thinking. Professionally. Probably. And personally, she met his eyes. Personally, I think I'll remember that kiss every time you tell me to plan a board meeting. Nathaniel smiled as he reached up to gently brush a strand of hair from Leona's face. Monday, he said softly. Back to being professionals. Remember right. Total professionals, she echoed. I won't even recall that I once accused you of being a perfume-wearing creep in a train station. She stepped out of the car, gave him a small wave, casual, easy, and disappeared through the front door of her apartment building. Once inside, Leona closed the door, leaned back against it, then slowly slid down to the floor, grinning like a fool. Her heart beat against her ribs like a second voice, and her cheeks were still warm from the kiss. Her phone buzzed. Nathaniel. Got home safe. Just letting you know I'll keep pretending tonight didn't happen while secretly thinking about it every 5 minutes. Leona laughed silently. Reply deal. See you Monday, Mr. Gray. Strictly business. She added an angel emoji, then flopped onto her bed and buried her face in the pillow, letting out a muffled scream like a teenager with a crush. Monday came, and with it, the balancing act. Leona's first week at Greystone Hotels felt like performing ballet on a tightrope while juggling paperwork and office politics on fire. During the day, she and Nathaniel played their parts well. Miss Brooks, could you please coordinate the vendor calls? Of course, Mr. Gray. But when the sun set, their texts came alive with humor, ideas, and quiet glimpses into each other's minds. Late-night conversations danced between their favorite cities and a debate about whether thin crust or deep dish pizza was the superior art form. Her department was 2 floors below his, but Nathaniel always seemed to have reasons to check in personally, here for project updates, or just raiding our pastry tray again, Leona asked one morning, catching him in the break room with a chocolate donut. Both, he mumbled. Mid-bite. Great leaders are multitaskers. But not everything was playful. The first signs of friction came quietly, stares that lingered a second too long, conversations that stopped when she entered a room. And at the center of the tension stood Natalie Harper, the poised and polished marketing director, who, according to hushed office lore, had admired Nathaniel since his very first board meeting. With her flawless blonde curls, power suits, and a voice always a little too sweet. Natalie had a way of making Leona feel like she'd walked into the wrong scene, one morning catching Leona mid-conversation with Nathaniel in the hallway. Natalie paused with a tilt of her head. Tell me, sweetheart, do the printers run themselves where you used to work? Leona didn't miss a beat. No. Natalie. But we did have assistants. I suppose here we have marketing directors with free mornings. Nathaniel coughed into his sleeve to hide his laugh. Still. Things escalated quickly. When Leona was asked to lead the highly anticipated launch event for the new coastal resort in Monterey, a project Natalie had clearly been eyeing, the air shifted. In the next meeting, Natalie's voice was calm but tight. With all due respect, she's only been here 2 weeks. Nathaniel didn't blink, and in 2 weeks, she's demonstrated more initiative than most in 2 years. The decision stands. Later that evening, Leona returned to her desk to find a folded note. No one climbs this fast unless they're climbing over someone. Watch yourself. She crushed the paper in her fist. Her jaw clenched, but the sting of it had already landed. The looks, the hushed tones in hallways. She could feel the quiet judgment sliding along the walls behind her. By Friday, the week had worn her down. She stepped into the elevator, only to find Nathaniel already inside. For a moment, she hesitated, as if standing on the edge of something she couldn't name. "You all right?" he asked, concern etched across his brow. "I think we're being too visible," she said quietly. He looked confused. "Visible people are talking. Nathaniel, about me, about us, about how fast I got this role." His jaw tensed. "Who it doesn't matter," she said, shaking her head. "Maybe we should be more careful." The elevator chimed, and she stepped out without waiting for a response, leaving him standing alone, his thoughts louder than the hum of the doors closing behind her. That day, Leona kept her distance, pouring herself into every detail of the upcoming event. Color palettes, guest lists, logistics, anything but eye contact, anything but the memory of his hands, his voice, his kiss. That evening, as the city melted into the warm hues of sunset, Leona's phone rang. Melanie's voice burst through the line, full of mischief. "So tell me, corporate Cinderella, did the prince sneak in another kiss today?" "Don't start." "Mel," Leona sighed. "It's complicated. Complicated like we kissed and now we're dodging rumors complicated. Or he's my boss and I don't know if I'm losing my mind complicated." Leona stared out the window at the skyline, her fingers tapping the desk slowly. "I mean, we kissed. Once. We've talked. A lot. But it's not like we're official." Melanie's tone softened. "Do you want it to be official?" Leona hesitated. "I don't know. Mel. He's wonderful. But he's also Nathaniel Gray, CEO of a luxury empire. I plan birthday parties with glitter bombs. His world has wine lists. Mine has microwavable soup." Unbeknownst to Leona, just outside her office, someone was listening. Natalie Harper stood near the corner, her phone angled just enough to snap a photo, Leona smiling softly. The city stretching behind her like a movie backdrop. Perfect ammunition for whispers. Monday arrived with a tension already in the air. Leona had barely set her bag down when Nathaniel appeared at her door, jaw tight. "We need to talk," he said. She followed him to his office. He closed the door carefully. "My father wants to meet you." Leona blinked. "Your father, as in Richard Gray, the chairman." He nodded, running a hand through his hair, the gesture of a man walking a mental tightrope. "Someone sent him photos of us. He's not happy." "Photos?" she asked. Her voice caught between confusion and disbelief. "What kind of photos? Us talking, laughing, you on your phone, smiling, nothing inappropriate, but enough to be twisted." Leona felt her stomach twist. "What do we do? I'll handle it," Nathaniel said firmly. "Don't worry." But not worrying was easier said than done, especially when, just after lunch, Leona received an invitation that made her hands go cold. "Mr. Gray will see you. Top floor. Immediately. The top floor. The domain of Richard Gray. A place few employees ever stepped into unless it was for a promotion. Or a problem." Leona entered a space that looked more like a modern museum than an office. Polished stone floors. Rare art, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city seem small. Behind an imposing desk sat a man who bore Nathaniel's eyes, but none of his warmth. "Miss Brooks," he said without rising. "Sit." Her legs were suddenly not quite steady, but she obeyed. "It's a pleasure to finally. Let's not waste time." He interrupted. My son has always had a weakness for pretty distractions in the workplace. Leona's face burned. Excuse me. He pushed a few photographs toward her, Nathaniel laughing with her near the break room, a hallway exchange, her on the phone, smiling out the window. These were sent to me yesterday. Anonymous, but suggestive. There's nothing suggestive about them, Leona said carefully. They're just moments. He leaned back in his leather chair, hands folded. Miss Brooks, let's not pretend. You seem intelligent. You must understand the optics. Leona didn't reply. This company isn't just business. Richard continued. It's legacy. Nathaniel is meant to inherit it one day. And with that legacy comes image, expectation, alignment. Are you saying I don't align? She asked quietly. I'm saying, he said, his tone sharp as glass. You're a woman from a modest background. You arrived here recently, promoted quickly. That raises questions. In our world, perception is reality. Leona's hands clenched under the desk. So this is about class, about where I came from. It's about what the board, the media, and the public see when they look at him, and by extension, who stands beside him. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft hum of the air system. Leona stood, her voice low but steady. Thank you for the clarity, Mr. Gray. And with that, she left the office, 100 thoughts crashing through her chest like waves on stone. Leona felt the heat rising in her chest, not from shame, but from something deeper, rawer. I earned that promotion, she said, voice calm but trembling beneath. My background doesn't cancel out my ability. My work speaks for itself. Richard Gray didn't flinch. His smile was thin, measured, and utterly void of warmth. I'm sure you believe that, he said smoothly, but perception isn't always built on truth. A whisper, a glance, a photo, they travel faster than intent. And then, the door opened. Nathaniel stepped in, fury visible in every step. Enough, he said. You don't get to interrogate my team like this. Richard raised an eyebrow, unbothered. We were simply discussing expectations. Expectations, Nathaniel snapped. You were implying threats. He turned to Leona, eyes softening. You okay? She nodded, barely, but inside, everything felt wrong. Miss Brooks, Richard said, his voice laced with false politeness. Would you give us a moment? She walked out slowly, but even with the door closed, she could still hear them, voices raised, sharp, words like scandal, reputation, legacy bouncing through the marble hallway like ghosts with claws. Back at her desk, Leona couldn't focus. Everything she'd worked for felt suddenly fragile. Her phone buzzed. It was Melanie. Emergency lunch. Now. No excuses. At the tiny cafe around the corner, Leona sank into her seat. He said I was a distraction, she muttered. That I'm climbing the ladder by clinging to Nathaniel's coat. What a jerk, Melanie said, fury flashing in her eyes. What are you going to do? What can I do? He owns the building. And Nathaniel, I don't even know where he stands anymore. Almost on cue. Her phone rang. Nathaniel. We need to talk. 15 minutes later. He walked in. His eyes were stormy, jaw tense, but his shoulders carried a weight that looked older than he was. Melanie stood, grabbing her purse. I'll leave you two. Call me. Alone. Nathaniel sat down and exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands over his face. My father. He's a relic, a powerful one. But that doesn't make him right. He said he'd ruin me, Leona said, her voice barely above a whisper. That if we continue whatever this is, he'll bury my career before it even begins. Nathaniel looked like someone had punched him in the chest. And what is this? Nathaniel, is it something real? Or just a moment that got out of hand? I don't want you to have to choose, he said softly. But what if I want to choose? Her voice cracked. Then it's the wrong choice. We've known each other, 3 weeks, and it started with a hug that shouldn't have happened. His eyes flashed, pain surfacing. So that's all it was to you. A mistake. No, she whispered. But maybe a mistake that grew too fast. Too soon. And now it's a fire we can't control. Tension twisted in the space between them. Maybe I should quit, Leona said, standing abruptly. Maybe that's the only way to stop the rumors. No, Nathaniel said firmly. You worked hard to get here, and yet everyone believes I didn't. Her eyes glistened. That I just slept my way into a title. Nathaniel winced, as if her words had struck bone. That's not how people see you. No, then why am I in your father's email inbox, framed like a scandal? Natalie sent those pictures, he said quietly. She's always known how to play dirty. This isn't a game, Nathaniel. It's my name, my career, your heart. He finished gently. She didn't answer. Tears threatened behind her eyes. It's not fair, she whispered. I finally found a place where I felt alive again. I found you, and now I have to choose. You don't, he said. Let me deal with my father. I'll fight this, even if it means losing everything he built. Leona looked at him, this man who once seemed so distant, now willing to burn his own name for her. But do you even want that legacy, she asked. He paused. Sometimes. I'm not sure. She picked up her bag, steadying her breath. I need space, time. I need to think. Leona, he started, but she was already walking away. I'm resigning tomorrow, Leona said softly. Nathaniel blinked. That might make sense for everyone, but not for me. His voice faltered at the edge of those words. She leaned forward gently, brushing her lips against his forehead, a goodbye disguised as tenderness. Thank you, she whispered, for hugging the wrong girl that day. Then she stood and walked out of the cafe, her spine straight, her heart breaking. The tears didn't come until she was alone, blending into the faceless rhythm of the city. She wandered the sidewalks like a sleepwalker, her phone buzzing again and again with his name, but she couldn't bring herself to look. Not yet. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the walls feeling both too close and far too empty. In the early hours, she opened her laptop and typed the letter, a short, quiet resignation, no drama, no accusations, just a closing line. Thank you for the opportunity. She clicked send and immediately shut the laptop. The reply came faster than she expected. Nathaniel, please, let me make this right. Don't walk away from us. But she already had. From the job, from the fantasy, from the boy who wore tailored suits and made her believe in something foolish that a mistaken embrace could rewrite a life. 2 weeks passed like mist. 2 weeks of unanswered emails, ignored calls, half-hearted interviews, and nights that ended with her staring at the dark ceiling, hoping sleep would swallow her whole. Her phone had finally gone quiet. Even Nathaniel had stopped reaching out. Leona was eating soggy cereal in her bathrobe again when Melanie barged into the apartment without knocking. That's it, she announced. Good morning to you too, Leona said dully. Melanie put her hands on her hips. This tragic indie film girl routine. It ends today. I'm fine. I sent out 3 resumes this morning. Melanie blinked. Wow. A whole 3. Should we alert the press? She dropped onto the couch with a dramatic sigh. What about Nathaniel? What about him? Leona muttered, pushing the cereal away. He tried, "You ghosted. Now, nothing." Then he got the message. "Or maybe," Melanie said, narrowing her eyes, "he's just as wrecked as you are." "I'm not wrecked," Leona said. "Right, which explains the 3-day-old shirt and the growing shrine of takeout boxes in your kitchen." Meanwhile, in Nathaniel's office, the chaos was quieter, but just as consuming. Papers gathered dust. Meetings were delayed. His inbox overflowed. No one asked questions. They avoided his eyes, avoided his silence. Emily didn't. She strode in and dropped a glossy magazine on his desk. "Forbes cover," she said. "Congratulations. You look like a man who got run over by his own career." Nathaniel didn't respond. "You met her at a train station," Emily continued. "It's poetic, actually, and now you're here, sulking like some tragic prince. I'm working. You're staring at a window." He looked up, his eyes dim. "What do you want me to do?" She said goodbye. And you let her." Emily crossed her arms. "You're the guy who closed that impossible deal in the Bahamas. Remember the one who kept the Tokyo branch alive when no one believed it could be done? Now you're stuck because you care." Nathaniel rubbed his temples. "It's not the same. No, it's worse. Because this matters." She sat on the edge of the desk. "She made you laugh, Nathaniel. She made you real again." He didn't argue, because she was right. "You can either keep sitting here waiting for time to do the healing," Emily said, "or you can do something." That night, Nathaniel drove through the city aimlessly, headlights cutting through the dark. Without realizing, he ended up outside her building. The window on the 3rd floor glowed. He sat in the car for a long time, staring at it, wondering if she was reading, laughing, crying. Then his phone rang. Natalie. He stared at the name, unmoving. "William." Her voice came through, clipped and urgent. "We have a problem. The Malibu launch is spiraling. Everything's been off balance since Miss Brooks walked out." "Not now." "Natalie," Nathaniel said, his voice low. "But the launch," I said. "Not now." He ended the call and stared back at the soft-lit window on the 3rd floor, his eyes tired, his heart unsure. Inside that room, Leona was doing her best to focus on a movie, but the screen blurred in and out of meaning. Her thoughts, as usual, drifted back to him. The doorbell startled her. "Who is it?" she asked through the intercom, her voice unsure. "Delivery." For Leona Brooks, curious. She threw on a sweater and headed downstairs. But when she arrived, the lobby was empty, no delivery person, just a small box on the front counter with her name neatly written on the lid. Inside was a phone. On the screen, a note in Nathaniel's handwriting, "Press play." She hesitated, then tapped the voice recorder icon. His voice filled the space. "Leona, if you're hearing this, it means Emily managed to get this to you. And yeah, this is probably one of the stranger things I've done." He laughed nervously, a soft, uncertain sound. "I've been trying to find the right words for 2 weeks, but the truth is, I'm terrible at speaking when it counts." There was a pause, the sound of him breathing, real and vulnerable. "I understand why you left. You were thrown into a storm you didn't ask for. The whispers, the judgment, my father. None of that was fair." Leona could feel the tears gathering, but she didn't stop the recording. "But here's the truth. That hug in the train station, it was a mistake, but it was the best mistake of my life." Her breath caught. "I know it sounds impossible. We haven't known each other long, but when I'm around you, I feel like I can exhale. like I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not Nathaniel Gray, CEO. I'm just me. There was another pause, longer this time, and today. I stood up to him, to my father. I told him you weren't negotiable, that if he wants me to carry this legacy, it has to include the people who make me whole in whatever way they choose to be in my life. Now, Leona was crying, the phone pressed tightly in her hand. If there's any part of you that still wonders what if, I'll be at the cafe by the lake in Central Park. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock. If you don't come, I'll understand. I won't reach out again. Silence. Then the recording ended, and Leona stood alone in the lobby, holding that small phone as if it contained a heartbeat. Across the street, Nathaniel saw the lights in her apartment flicker off. He started the car, his chest heavy, but for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope glowed quietly inside him. Elsewhere, in the sparkling heart of the city, the Grand Astoria Hotel pulsed with life. The annual Greystone Gala, the largest night of the year, was in full swing. A blend of wealth, ambition, and soft-spoken million-dollar handshakes. Leona adjusted her catering uniform, black, plain, functional. After weeks of unemployment, she had taken a temporary job with a hospitality staffing agency. Life has a sense of irony tonight. She was working the very event she had once been meant to organize. Appetizers to the East Ballroom. Champagne rotation every 40 minutes. No underage hands near the flutes, she instructed the staff firmly, her voice steady despite the butterflies dancing inside her chest. Her temporary supervisor, a large man with an absurd mustache and the name Gregory stitched on his vest, looked at her with approval. "You've done this before," Leona offered a tight smile. Something like that. Across the room, Nathaniel stood near the bar, adjusting his tie for the 5th time, barely hearing the investor beside him drone on about projected occupancy trends. From a distance, Richard Gray watched him carefully, the stern set of his jaw betraying his displeasure. "Nathaniel," he murmured as he approached, "you need to focus." But Nathaniel's eyes weren't on charts or boardrooms anymore. They were searching for something real, for someone. "Tanaka's considering expanding into 3 more properties in Tokyo," Richard Gray said, watching his son closely. "He's waiting for confirmation." "I'm listening," Nathaniel replied, jaw tense. "You've been distracted. I'm focused. You don't look it." Ever since that incident, Nathaniel turned sharply. "She has a name, Dad, and I've already said what I needed to say about it." Richard exhaled, long and heavy. "Son, I know you think it's love, but I know it is." And yet she left. No fight, no goodbye. "She didn't leave," Nathaniel said coldly. "She was pushed, and you know it." Before the tension could stretch further, the lights above them flickered, then snapped off entirely. A wave of confusion rolled through the ballroom like thunder. "What's happening?" Richard barked. A flustered manager rushed over. "Electrical issue, sir." The backup system should have kicked in automatically, but in the growing murmur, a calm, steady voice rose above the noise. "Everyone, please stay where you are. We'll have lighting shortly. There's no danger." Nathaniel froze. He knew that voice. Every word was etched into his memory. Leona. In the darkened hall, Leona had taken charge without hesitation. The catering team panicked, guests whispered nervously, but she remained calm. With a phone flashlight, she directed servers to distribute candles to each table. Over her radio, she spoke clearly to the maintenance crew. She sent half the catering team to the terrace, where the last sliver of daylight remained, and rerouted the premium dishes and vintage champagne there. A voice called out through the darkness. "Who's in charge here?" The hotel manager's locked in the control room with a panic attack, Leona replied, not looking up. And who are you? The voice asked again. Temporary staff. But tonight, I'm making sure your event doesn't collapse. From across the room. Nathaniel watched, stunned. When the emergency lighting finally kicked in, it painted her in soft amber light. She was radiant, focused, composed, brilliant. Leona. He breathed. She turned, her breath catching as their eyes met. Nathaniel. Richard's gaze bounced between them. You know her? He asked. Though the answer was obvious. Leona straightened her spine. Mr. Gray, if you'll excuse me, I have a crisis to manage. She walked away without hesitation, leaving father and son in silence. It's her, Richard said at last. Nathaniel didn't blink. Yes. And it seems she's salvaging your $1 million event. For the next half hour, Leona orchestrated a rescue mission worthy of legends. Guests were smoothly relocated. Music was adapted. A pianist who turned out to be the spouse of a travel executive agreed to play on the terrace. Servers floated through the crowd with trays of warm appetizers, lit by candles and laughter. When the lights finally returned, the disaster had transformed into something magical, a spontaneous, exclusive soiree that people would talk about for years. The hotel manager, red-faced and sweating, approached Richard with an apologetic tone. We've located the issue, sir. I deeply regret the interruption. Richard waved it off, eyes narrowed. That young woman who was, catering staff. The manager stammered. I believe she's temporary. Nathaniel had seen enough. He stepped up onto the small platform beside the band, who were tuning up for the second half of the night. He took the microphone with quiet resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. Thank you for your patience during our little adventure. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. At Greystone Hotels, we pride ourselves on excellence, on flexibility, on grace under pressure. His eyes scanned the room, and then they found her. And tonight, we all witnessed that excellence not in spreadsheets or contracts, but in the hands and heart of someone who reminded us why we do what we do. From behind one of the grand pillars, Leona tried to make herself invisible. It didn't work. I'd like to invite someone to the stage, Nathaniel said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper, more vulnerable. The person who turned what could have been a disaster into something unforgettable. A spotlight moved across the crowd. It landed on her. Leona Brooks. She froze. Her heart jumped. Every gaze in the room seemed to turn toward her all at once. Still. She took a breath, forced her legs to move, and made her way to the stage one step at a time. Nathaniel extended a hand. His whisper barely reached her over the applause. Trust me. She placed her hand in his and stepped up beside him. Leona was once part of our team, he said, turning to face the room. And tonight, she reminded all of us why that was one of the best decisions this company ever made. The room erupted in applause. Even some of the most rigid executives nodded in appreciation, not at the CEO, but at her. Her composure, her creativity, her ability to act with grace under pressure. These are the values we strive for at Greystone Hotels. He paused. His next words came slower, almost trembling. And if I can speak not as a businessman, but as a man, she also represents something else to me. Something very personal. A hush fell over the room. Richard Gray, seated at the front, lifted his chin, watching his son closely. Sometimes, Nathaniel said, life gives us gifts that come dressed as mistakes, a wrong turn, A misunderstood hug at a crowded train station. Leona blinked, tears welling. But sometimes, what feels like an accident is actually the beginning of something real. He turned to her, forgetting the audience, the pressure, the spotlight. I was a fool. Leona, I should have fought harder. I should have told you out loud that you're worth every risk, every choice, every change. She stared at him, her emotions caught somewhere between love and disbelief. I'm not asking you to come back to the company, he said. I'm asking you to come back to me. For a moment, the room was silent. Then someone clapped from the back. It grew, one by one. Dozens of hands joined until the room roared with applause. Even Richard Gray stood reluctantly. Perhaps, but he clapped, and for the first time, his son didn't look away. Leona wiped her tears and smiled through them. That was wildly unprofessional. Mr. Gray, she said, laughing softly. Absolutely fireable behavior. He smiled, breathless. Then fire me, and right there, in front of nearly 300 of the industry's most polished elites. She kissed him not with drama, but with quiet certainty. 3 months later, Leona sat cross-legged on the couch in her new apartment, sun pouring through the windows, half-unpacked boxes scattered around like old chapters not yet closed. The place was bigger than anything she'd lived in before, though she insisted on paying rent herself. Her new company, Abrasoto Events, already had a waiting list of clients. Many of them came by word of mouth. Many whispered his name. Her phone rang. Melanie. How's the city's most sought-after entrepreneur today? Overwhelmed, exhausted, terrified, and kind of ridiculously happy. And the romance with the CEO still surprisingly functional, Leona said with a smile. Though his father still makes that face like he swallowed a lemon. But you organized his anniversary party, Melanie reminded her, and charmed half his uptight friends. You're a genius, more like a strategist. Leona laughed. Fine line. I'll let you get ready. Call me later. Leona hung up and looked around. The apartment wasn't perfect yet, art still on the floor. Books not yet shelved, but it already felt like hers. Her phone buzzed again. Nathaniel. On my way. Emily's excited. Prepare for a round of very personal questions about our future. She laughed, sent back a panic emoji, and stood to get dressed. She chose something simple, soft, not a corporate suit, not a catering uniform, just a dress that made her feel like herself. And when she glanced in the mirror, she saw a woman who had lost everything and then built something better on her own terms. The doorbell rang. Ung ching, shak, vao gi, atra. Nathaniel stood there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and wearing the kind of smile that still made Leona forget how to breathe. Ready for my sister's interrogation, he asked, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Emotionally somewhat. Where is she? She'll be late. As always. Fashionably chaotic. As they drove through the city, Nathaniel seemed off. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. Checked the rearview mirror too many times. You okay? Leona asked. You're acting like you just robbed a bank. What, me no? Perfectly calm, totally standard Saturday. Nathaniel Gray. You're a terrible liar. Your ear turns red when you're hiding something. He instinctively touched it. Seriously, like a traffic light. What are you up to? Nothing, he said too quickly. Just really excited for lunch. But instead of turning toward their usual bistro, he veered down a quiet lane into a park Leona had never visited. I thought we were meeting Emily. She's meeting us here, he replied, parking the car. The path he led her down was dappled in sunlight and completely silent, as if the world had paused. And then, through the trees, she saw it, a clearing, a small round table set for two, white linen, candles flickering even in daylight, flowers in glass jars, a bottle of champagne and a bucket of ice. "Nathaniel," she whispered. "What? Is this a picnic?" "With good lighting," he said, trying to sound casual. "And Emily running late," he admitted with a grin. Suspicion flickered in her eyes, but the quiet beauty of the moment softened her edges. Lunch was perfect, all her favorite dishes, served one by a silent, graceful waiter who seemed to vanish between trees. "Is this a celebration? I forgot," she asked, smiling as dessert arrived. "Not quite," Nathaniel said, suddenly quieter. He reached across the table and held her hands. "Do you remember the first time we met? You mean the time you assaulted me with affection at the train station? I call it accidental hugging under chaotic circumstances. You called me your sister, and said something about old ladies and Uno," he added, laughing. "Details," she said, her voice softening. He grew more serious. "That wrong hug changed my life." Her heartbeat stumbled. "Nathaniel, let me finish before I lose the courage." He exhaled. "These months, they've been the most real I've ever felt. You make me better. You make me laugh. You make me forget what people expect and remember what I want. You're doing great," she whispered, her eyes glossy. "And what I want." He reached into his pocket, is to make one more ridiculous, life-changing mistake. At that moment, a group emerged from behind the trees. Emily, Melanie, her mother. Even Richard Gray, slightly awkward, slightly overdressed, but smiling with something that resembled genuine warmth. "What is happening?" Leona asked, spinning toward him. Nathaniel dropped to one knee. "Leona Brooks," he said, his voice steady now. "Will you make the mistake of marrying me?" He opened a ring box. Leona gasped and laughed. "That's not even my size." "I know." He groaned. "Emily gave me the wrong one, but I have a plan B." He pulled out a second, smaller box. Inside was a simpler ring, elegant, understated, perfect. "I always have a backup." She was laughing and crying all at once. "This is insane," she said. "We've only known each other for, what, 5 months, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days." Emily shouted from the trees. "You're counting Nathaniel called?" "Obviously." Leona looked around, at the man kneeling before her, at the people who had watched them grow, at the sky above, clear and honest. Then she looked back into Nathaniel's eyes and smiled. Leona looked into Nathaniel's eyes, her fingers trembling slightly. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but sure. "Yes, I'll make this beautiful, unpredictable mistake with you." Laughter and applause erupted around them as Nathaniel slid the right ring, onto her finger. He kissed her gently as Emily cheered. Melanie whistled, and even Richard Gray smiled. He blinked fast, discreetly brushing the corner of his eye. Leona's mother ran forward and hugged her daughter tightly. "My daughter, marrying the man who hugged her by accident," she said. "If this were a telenovela, no one would believe it." "Mama, please," Leona blushed. "But it's true. You're the humble girl with a wild purse who won over the CEO." Nathaniel reached for her hand with sincerity. "I promise I'll take good care of her, Mrs. Brooks." "I'm sure you will, dear. And if you don't, well, you've met the purse." Everyone laughed, the joy genuine and full. Later, as the sun dipped low, Leona and Nathaniel sat on a quiet bench in the park, the last golden light catching in her hair. So, future Mrs. Gray, he teased. Actually, future Mrs. Brooks Gray, she corrected, grinning. He nodded. Of course. How could I forget any regrets, he asked, brushing his thumb over her hand. Leona looked down at the ring, then up at the man beside her. Just one, she said thoughtfully. What's that? That I didn't bring a bigger purse that day. I might have knocked you out completely. Nathaniel laughed, pulling her close. I love you, you impossible, wonderful woman. I love you too, you ridiculous man in a suit. It was a clear, warm Saturday morning when Leona stood in the bridal suite, her heart thudding wildly as Melanie adjusted the hem of her gown. Stop moving, Melanie hissed through pins clenched in her teeth. I can't. I think I'm having a full-body panic. You'll be fine, Melanie said, unless a meteor crashes into the ceremony, and even then, we'll improvise. Emily entered, holding 2 glasses of champagne. How's the bravest bride in the world? She's vibrating. Melanie answered. Help me hold her down. Emily handed Leona a glass. Nathaniel's equally terrified, if that helps. He's changed his tie 3 times, and his socks twice. Leona laughed nervously. Somehow that doesn't help. But it's cute. At that moment, her mother burst in, holding a small box wrapped in layers of tissue paper. My daughter, she said, breathless. I brought something important. Mama, if that's the tiara from Aunt Consuela better, her mother declared with flair. She opened the box, revealing a delicate embroidered handkerchief ivory lace, soft with age. This belonged to your grandmother, who got it from her mother, who got it from hers, passed down for love stories born from chaos. Leona's eyes shimmered. Mama, it's beautiful. And look, her mother pointed. Your initials, and today's date, hand-stitched in the corner. Leona held the fabric to her heart. When did you even have time to a mother always finds time? Her mother said, brushing Leona's hair from her face. Especially when her daughter is marrying a man who could have chosen anyone but chose to hug a stranger at a train station. The room filled with laughter, warm, full, healing. Emily raised her glass. To the best mistake ever made. To unexpected encounters, Emily said, raising her glass. And accidental hugs that somehow work out, Melanie added with a grin. Meanwhile, across the estate in a room filled with bow ties, cufflinks, and last-minute nerves, Nathaniel stood in front of a mirror adjusting his 3rd suit of the day. His best friend and best man, Marcus, watched him with barely disguised amusement. It's just a suit, man. It's not just a suit, Nathaniel replied, tugging at the collar. It's the suit. Marcus chuckled, lounging on the couch. You've pulled off billion-dollar mergers without blinking. What's got you sweating now? Nathaniel took a breath. That was business. This is forever. Marcus's grin softened. You sure about that? He asked, a rare seriousness in his voice. You two haven't known each other long. Nathaniel paused, meeting his friend's eyes in the mirror. I'm more sure of her than I've been about anything in my life, he said quietly. She's like the missing piece I didn't even know I was missing. Marcus smiled. Then I'm happy for you, man. And I can't wait to see what kind of chaos the next 50 years brings. Just then, Richard Gray entered the room immaculate in a slate gray suit, but there was a rare gentleness in his expression. Son, he said, are you ready? I think so. Nathaniel replied, one last tug at the tie. Richard stepped forward, placing both hands on his son's shoulders. I was wrong about her. I know. No, he said firmly. You don't. I was really, truly wrong. She's not just what you need. She's what this family needs. Nathaniel blinked, surprised. Who are you? And what did you do with Richard Gray? The older man laughed, a sound so rare that Marcus glanced over in disbelief. Let's just say your mother reminded me that happiness isn't found in boardrooms. And I realized I'd rather watch my son live than walk a life I scripted for him. From his jacket, he pulled out a small blue velvet box. This belonged to your grandmother, he said. She asked me to give it to the woman who would truly win your heart. Nathaniel opened it carefully. Inside lay a delicate gold bracelet, studded with small sapphires. She's going to love this, Nathaniel murmured. It's her something blue, Richard added with a smile. And for the record, your grandmother also said it had to go to the girl who makes you laugh more than you cry. Nathaniel swallowed hard. Thank you, Dad. Outside in the garden. Guests began to arrive. The setup was quietly elegant, just as Leona had insisted, a balance of soft florals, warm wood, and quiet charm. No extravagance, no showy displays. Gregory, the man with the unforgettable mustache and a heart twice the size of his former ego, now served as volunteer coordinator. He directed guests with the same passion he once used to manage kitchens, refusing payment. He said it was honor enough, Nathaniel told Marcus, watching him gesture guests toward their seats. Apparently, he wants to be known as the man who helped orchestrate the wedding of the woman who tamed the lion of hospitality. You've got quite a reputation to live up to, Marcus teased. The ceremony was set for 4 o'clock. At 3:50, the DJ still hadn't arrived. At 3:55, Leona's grandmother realized she'd left her dentures at the hotel. At 4, half the guests were seated, but the officiant was nowhere to be found. And surprisingly, perhaps shockingly, Natalie Harper arrived, hair perfectly curled, dress understated, for once. She took a seat near the back, unnoticed by many, but not by Leona. Even more surprising than her arrival was what she was about to do next. Natalie Harper was crouched behind the sound system, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly undone, not her usual state of being. Emily stared at her, puzzled. Natalie, are you? DJing Natalie didn't look up. Let's just say, buying your bridesmaid dress was my official apology. This is my unofficial one. She tapped her phone again, adjusting the emergency playlist. Nobody deserves a wedding without music. Not even someone who once nearly stole my job. Emily blinked. You really have changed. Natalie smiled faintly. Or maybe I finally got out of my own way. Behind the scenes, Leona was fighting off more than butterflies. Her mother had gone from sobbing to fretting in 90-second intervals. What if your father sings the family song and everyone thinks it's weird? What if these high society people think we're too much? Leona took her mother's hands gently. Mama, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that wealth does not equal culture. Half these people couldn't tell Puccini from primetime TV. Her mother laughed through the sniffles. And after 2 glasses of champagne, even Dad's falsetto will sound like opera. Melanie peeked through the curtains, eyes wide. DEFCON 1. Your uncle just told 3 CEOs that he once won a Latin dance championship in 1979. Leona sighed, hand to her forehead. How many glasses of wine, enough to believe he can outdance Richard Gray? He's preparing a challenge. This is going to feel less like a wedding and more like a failed cultural merger. Leona groaned. Emily slipped an arm around her. Good. My side looks like they escaped from a finance catalog. We need this chaos. Even fate seemed to join in. The delay caused by the missing officiant had a hidden blessing. Leona's grandmother had time to retrieve her dentures. Hand-delivered by a chauffeur Nathaniel had personally dispatched. My grandson is a saint, the old woman declared, carefully securing them into place. Imagine sending a driver to fetch a smile for an old lady. At 4:15, somehow, everything fell into place. The officiant arrived, flushed and apologetic. The DJ, operating from Natalie's carefully curated playlist, played soft classical guitar from her phone. Guests mingled freely, fashion elites and barbecue enthusiasts exchanging tips, champagne flutes clinking between people who'd likely never meet again. Richard Gray stood among a cluster of Leona's aunts who, naturally, were teaching him how to salsa. I never thought I'd see my father dance, Nathaniel said to Emily, shaking his head. I think Leona's done more for this family in 6 months than therapy did in 10 years. She whispered back. The music swelled. Nathaniel stood at the altar, heart pounding, eyes locked on the path. Emily walked first, radiant and proud. Then Melanie, half grinning through teary eyes. And then everyone rose. Leona appeared at the end of the aisle, the light catching on her simple gown, her arm linked with her mother, who was already sobbing. Mama, you promised you wouldn't cry, Leona whispered. I lied. Her mother sobbed louder, unbothered. The crowd smiled, but no one expected what happened next. Bounding down the aisle, tongue out and tail wagging furiously, came Winston, the family's beloved French bulldog wearing a tiny floral collar and carrying the rings on his back. The laughter that broke out was warm and unfiltered. Leona paused mid-step. Seriously, you trained him, Nathaniel. At the altar, beamed. He trained me first. Just after the exchange of vows was about to begin, the unexpected happened. Winston, the tiny French bulldog in a miniature bow tie, decided it was his moment for glory. He tore down the aisle like a four-legged comet, barking joyfully as guests turned in their seats, laughing and cheering. Winston Emily hissed, half rising, trying to catch him. But the pup had other plans. He sprinted directly toward Leona, jumping up against her legs as if reuniting with an old friend. Leona bent down, laughing, completely unbothered by the wedding gown she was now kneeling in. Is this the something borrowed, she joked? Nathaniel chuckled. We're not even married yet, and he's already chosen his side. When she finally reached the altar, Leona looked radiant, glowing with something beyond joy. Nathaniel could barely speak. You're indescribable. Indescribable good or indescribable disaster, she teased. The best kind. The kind that makes everything else fade away. The officiant cleared his throat, preparing to begin, but before he could utter a word, Richard Gray stood up. A quiet ripple spread across the crowd. I'd like to say something, if I may. Nathaniel and Leona exchanged a glance. Richard straightened his jacket, then looked out across the guests. When my son told me he was marrying a woman he met less than 6 months ago, a woman he literally mistook for someone else at a train station, I thought he'd gone mad. Laughter was held in tension, unsure of the direction, but then, Richard continued, his voice gentler. I watched him change. I saw him smile more, speak softer, stand straighter, as if something lost had been returned to him. Leona felt her throat tighten, and I realized something sometimes. The best things in life begin as mistakes. He turned to her directly. Leona, welcome to the Gray family. We're opinionated, dramatic, and usually late. But from now on, we're also yours. The guests laughed, and the warmth in the air became almost tangible. Richard sat down, quietly, proud. Then came the moment. The officiant asked for the rings, and once again, Winston rose to the occasion. From where he'd been snoozing near Emily's shoes, the little dog trotted up the aisle with purpose, a small ring pillow attached to his collar like a tiny hero's cape. A wave of delighted laughter followed. Well, the officiant said, smiling, Looks like we found our ring bearer. Nathaniel knelt, unfastened the rings, and patted Winston on the head. Good job, buddy. It was time. Nathaniel turned to face Leona, holding her hands. Leona, he said, his voice full of emotion. When I hugged you at that train station, thinking you were someone else, I didn't know I was actually hugging my future. You taught me that I don't need to have all the answers. I just need to be real with you. I promise to hold you every day, always with a warning, and always with all my love. The crowd chuckled, and more than a few tears shimmered. Then it was Leona's turn. Nathaniel, she began, her voice unsteady but strong. I smacked you with a purse the first time we met. Definitely not the most romantic opening, but you kept showing up, with that ridiculously confident grin like someone who knew how the story ended. And you were right. I promised to walk beside you through every success and every mistake. And I promise to only ever swing that purse again if you really deserve it. Laughter rang out again, and even the officiant chuckled before continuing, but Nathaniel gently raised a hand. Before we finish, he said, I have one more promise to make. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small, blue velvet box. This was from my grandmother. She told my father it should go to the girl who makes me laugh more than I cry. He opened it. Inside was a delicate bracelet gold, with tiny sapphires glinting in the sun. Leona gasped softly. Nathaniel gently fastened it around her wrist. Something blue, she whispered, her voice trembling. And something true, he added, to match the sky in your eyes. Nathaniel whispered so only Leona could hear, as he slipped the sapphire bracelet onto her wrist. When the moment came for their vows for the words that would tie them together forever, neither hesitated. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the officiant said, smiling. You may kiss the bride. Nathaniel cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle, reverent. Thank you, he whispered, for being the wrong person, at the most right time. And thank you, she murmured back, for giving the most perfect wrong hug in the world. Their kiss was met with joyful applause. Emily sobbed openly, waving tissues like surrender flags. Melanie let out a proud, shrill whistle, and even Richard Gray looked quietly moved. At the reception, celebration bloomed like wildflowers. Leona's grandmother, teeth firmly in place, danced with one of Nathaniel's uncles to a salsa beat. The DJ, now finally on duty, mixed everything from classical waltzes to retro pop. In a corner, Leona's mother was deep in conversation with Richard about the intricate plot lines of Mexican soap operas. But the moment that surprised everyone came when Natalie stepped onto the stage, clutching the microphone. All chatter died. Good evening, she began, visibly nervous. I know most of you are wondering what I'm doing here. Leona raised an eyebrow, cautiously amused. I owe the bride an apology, a public one. Natalie continued. I let pride, jealousy, and fear make me someone I'm not proud of. She turned toward the head table. Leona, I tried to compete with you in a race you never asked to run, and instead of seeing your brilliance, I saw a threat. She raised her glass. But today, watching you and Nathaniel, I realized something. The best things in life happen when you stop trying to control the outcome. So cheers to the couple who reminded us that love is best when it's unexpected. She paused, then added with a grin. Also, are you hiring in your events department? The room burst into laughter. Leona stood, smiling, and walked over to hug her warm, sincere, gracious. Later, as the evening softened into golden tones and music drifted like mist, Nathaniel took Leona's hand and led her away from the crowd. Are you happy? He asked. More than I imagined possible, she said. Even with the chaos, especially with the chaos, she replied, glancing back at the joyful collision of both families. Emily teaching dance steps to Leona's cousins, her mother showing vacation photos to curious executives, Winston zigzagging between tables collecting head pats and scraps of cake. Leona leaned her head on Nathaniel's shoulder. "This is ours," she said. "Messy, beautiful, real." Nathaniel hugged her, not like the first day, rushed and mistaken, but with the kind of tenderness that comes from knowing exactly who you're holding. "You know," Leona whispered with a smirk. "I've always wanted to ask." "What?" "How did you not realize I wasn't your sister?" Nathaniel laughed, sheepish. "I was so focused on surprising her. I saw the yellow sweater, the backpack, and just went for it." Leona smiled. "Best mistake of your life." He nodded, easily. The music changed to a soft, romantic melody. Nathaniel offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Brooks Gray?" Always, Mr. Gray. Under strings of lights, surrounded by laughter and love, they danced. And as the world blurred around them, Nathaniel leaned close and whispered in her ear, "Nothing like the wrong hug to lead you to the right place." Leona closed her eyes, resting her head against him. The most right place in the world. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it shows up in a crowded train station, wrapped in a yellow sweater and mistaken identity. Leona and Nathaniel's story wasn't perfect. It was chaotic, clumsy, and wildly unexpected. But maybe that's what made it real. Because love doesn't need a flawless beginning. It just needs two people brave enough to stay even when everything starts with a mistake. So the next time life throws you off course, remember, the wrong turn might be leading you home, and the person you weren't supposed to meet might be the one who changes everything. If this story moved you, made you smile, or reminded you of someone special, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. There are more stories waiting, ones that touch the heart, stir the soul, and remind us that we're never as alone as we think. Thanks for watching. And until next time, hug carefully. Or maybe you don't. You never know where it might lead.